Hello, welcome to Revenant Reads. I'm Vin, and this is the Book Trek 2023 Star Trek Voyager Tag. So this tag was created by Steve Donahue, one of my fellow bridge officers for Book Trek 2023, which is an annual event in which here on BookTube we read Star Trek fiction and just geek out. And for this, he has been creating some original tags based on the various Star Trek iterations. He did the original series, he did Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, and now he finished it off with Voyager. Now we're a little bit into September. It's been very busy around here, but I'm finally trying to catch up with some things. So I wanted to make sure I did this tag because he likes to create the sort of nosy type of tags, not always bookish ones. He's more interested in people's personal lives. So I had seen some other versions of this. I had seen other people's answers. I had seen Randy from the Literate Texan. He did this, and I can echo a little bit something that he had said when it comes to Star Trek Voyager. I believe, if I remember correctly, he said that up until Star Trek Discovery, Voyager was his least favorite, and I would say that that's pretty true for me as well. There are certain things I loved about Voyager that I think they did really well. When it hit, it really hit, but I feel like its quality varied wildly sometimes. You know, my favorite is Star Trek Next Generation, which had a rocky 2 seasons to begin, but when it hit its stride, it really hit it. And it had a very long stride. I don't think that Voyager strides at success were quite as long. And there were some characters I really ended up liking. I loved 7 of 9 when she joined. The Doctor, I really liked. I actually really like Tom Paris. I think he's probably one of my favorites as well. But there were certain characters I just never really jived with. Something like Chakotay, which it just seems like they never knew what to do with him and with the rest of the Maquis that were on there. So there was a lot of inconsistency. NEELIX I never warmed up to. Ensign Harry Kim, that's another one who they just seemed to not know what to do with. So it was just a little bit of a mixed bag for me. I did like the show overall. I don't want to give the impression that I didn't like Voyager. I did like Voyager. But with that original run of those various seasons, I would say even up through Enterprise. I think I like Enterprise a little bit more than Voyager. It's just not my Star Trek in a lot of ways. I don't feel as connected to it as some of the other iterations that we were doing tags for. But with that said, we'll go on to look at Steve's prompts. And by the way, I'm kind of in a different location today. I'm in my office still, but I'm in got a different wall behind me. We're kind of rearranging some things in the office, mostly with desks. We bought a new desk that we still have to put together, but we took the old desk that was by the window and we've moved it, and we're trying to decide if that's what we like. So I don't have my regular spot by the window, which is over there right now. So I figured I'd just set up right here in front of a bookcase and get a little bit of filming in. So anyhow, let's continue on with the prompts here. So the Star Trek Voyager tag prompts are as follows. The first one: the USS Voyager is equipped with bioneural gel packs that are often more trouble than they're worth. Do you suffer from any kind of allergies? I do, kind of. I believe it's called cold. I wrote it down. I've got my iPad here to try and look at the questions, but I also wrote down what this is called. Urticaria, I think is how you say it. It's essentially, I would get an allergic reaction to the cold. So if my skin is exposed to the cold after a certain amount of time, it doesn't happen immediately, but it used to happen. It first happened when I was a teenager, and I went inside a friend's pool and the water was cold. And when I got out of the pool, I had hives, kind of itchy hives all over my body, especially around my midsection mostly. And at first we didn't know what it was. What was I reacting to? Was there something in the pool? Was there a chemical? And then I think it happened again in a different pool. And then in the winter it was happening when my skin was exposed to cold for a while. So I would get hives, and if like my hands were exposed to the cold for a long time, they would actually kind of swell up as well. But once I got into the warm temperature, it would kind of gradually just kind of go away on its own. And it's something that happened a lot when I was a teen out of nowhere, but it's happened less often as I've grown older. It's actually been a number of years now since I've had a reaction. I think the last time I actually really had a reaction was when I was in Hungary. And we went to a place, Bogach, in it had hot springs and pools, and I think being in the pool was the last time I ever had an allergic reaction to it, to the weather. But it's been a while now since I've had that kind of reaction. But otherwise, at least as far as I know, I don't have any kind of allergic reactions, at least not yet. Number 2, Captain Janeway is a terrific starship captain who sometimes doesn't know when to back off. Do you share this trait? Can you ever lose focus and need to be pulled away from something? I'd say not often. I'm usually pretty good at stepping away when I need to. I might get distracted sometimes. I need to be reminded to step away, but that actually doesn't happen very often either. No, I wouldn't say that I'm generally hyper-focused on something to a degree where I really need to back away. I'm pretty good at multitasking, actually, surprisingly. Number 3, First Officer Chakotay returns to Starfleet from the terrorist Maquis. How readily would the friends of your youth recognize you today? I guess they'd probably recognize me pretty well, because people who I barely knew in high school recognize me all the time. And embarrassingly, I often can't remember their names. But, you know, I'm certainly fatter than I used to be, and I'm hairier. I didn't have a big beard back in high school. I didn't feel like I talked to that many people in high school, but I'm constantly running into people who immediately recognize me and are asking me about how I'm doing. And a lot of times I'm struggling to place them of exactly who they are. So I guess if people I barely knew could recognize me, I'm sure my friends can. I'm sure that, you know, I've changed over the years. Hopefully I'm wiser. I guess that's debatable. But yeah, I don't think I've changed all that much, at least in any essential way. Number 4, Lieutenant Tuvok's precise age is a source of speculation on Voyager. Do you feel like your chronological age, younger, older? I mean, I'm in my early 40s, and I'm feeling like the years are flying by faster than I can comprehend. So I'd say I feel younger than my age, and I'm sure that's a feeling that's going to increase as the days and years and decades fly by. Number 5, Chief Engineer B'ELANNA Torres is half Klingon and half wimp. Does your own nature contain any radically different elements that you somehow keep aligned? This was a little bit tough. I mean, I think that one thing that I guess it's different in my perception of myself and what the reality is. I think of myself as a fairly lazy person, probably because I don't have like a regular exercise routine. I mean, I'm physically active sometimes, but not to the point where, you know, I'm going to get all jacked and cut from it. But I think of myself as lazy, and yet I really have a lot going on all the time. Of course, you know, I have a career. I teach. I've got 2 kids. I've got a house. I've got a wife. You know, those come with their own responsibilities that I have to focus on. But I've got a lot of hobbies. I mean, you know, BookTube. Obviously, I like to read a lot. I also co-host a horror movie discussion podcast, so I'm doing things for that as well. I've got creative projects going on and things I'm doing with various groups. So I've got a lot of pokers in the fire, and I somehow, up to this point, have stayed afloat. Not really sure how. So I think of myself as lazy, but in reality, I'm actually not, I guess. And that would be one thing. And I would say, as far as contrast, you know, inside my head, I can be very sarcastic and negative, but by the time it gets to my mouth and comes out, I come off as pretty calm and positive. But there's definitely a process that has to happen to get me there. Number 6, Tom Paris is Voyager's dauntless pilot. What's the largest mechanical object you've ever piloted? I think a U-Haul van. That's probably about the biggest thing that I've piloted. Yeah, very boring answer. Number 7, NEELIX. Voyager's cook and morale officer once said, "It's nice to be nice." Are you nice, just in general? I say I'm nice, but although I think I'd have to say I'm a very Connecticut version of nice. You know, I don't know if people can hear the thunder that's occurring right now. I don't know if it's picking up on the camera, but we got a thunderstorm rolling in. Sorry, as I was saying, I think people, when they come to New England, and especially if they come to Connecticut, they think that people are not very nice and that they're cold. And I would say that that's not really true. Connecticut version of nice is, we don't go out of our way to meet you or to get to know you. We don't always do a very good job of getting to know our neighbors even. But if our neighbors ever needed anything, we will absolutely be there and we'll do everything we can to help. Connecticut people tend to be a little bit more, I think they come off as aloof, but I think they're sort of culturally introverted. They are more private about things like sometimes employment, especially religion. They don't always wear it on their sleeve like you might find people in the American South do. So I feel like I kind of fit that. Like, I'm already introverted. I'm very nice, but you kind of get to know me to know if I'm nice, I would say. Number 8. 7 of 9 is a recovered Borg drone who finds a new family on Voyager. What are your thoughts on the concept of found family? How close are your friends to family? I got a core group of friends, especially a couple of guys who, we've been friends since we were, kind of tweens and teens throughout that time, sometimes a little bit more than that. And we go long stretches sometimes between seeing each other, but every time we do get together again, it's always like old times. And right from when my kids were little, we always called those guys uncle, even though they're not physically related to us. So they kind of have a special designation with that. And of course, they marry end up being aunt. I consider them kind of extended family, aside from, of course, my real brother, who I think is a great guy. But they are also, to my kids at least, uncles. I'm not sure if maybe you're picking it up. Let me know in the comments if you can actually hear this. But the thunder is cracking right now. Let's see. Number 9. Ensign Harry Kim is perpetually awestruck and dumbfounded, except in Timeless. How annoying are you? I'd say I'm never annoying. I'm always hilarious, and if my wife told you otherwise, it's definitely a lie. Number 10, Amelia Earhart was the first woman to fly solo across the Atlantic Ocean. Have you ever met a famous person? If not, have you ever come close? As the thunder rages, I have met some people. So I jotted down really quickly the people that I've actually met. I've seen a lot of famous people, sometimes from afar, but I go to a lot of horror conventions. Well, not a lot, but every year I go to a horror convention. And I always go in the room where the actors are, and I'll see them. But there's very few people I feel like I want to go up and meet, because I don't know what to say to them. I'd much rather speak to, if I go to a horror convention, I'd much rather talk to, like, the director or the writer, not always the actor. I do make an exception for Star Trek. That's one of my favorite, basically universes, fictional universes. So people that I have met, I've met, not all actors. I have met Jane Goodall. I met her when I was at undergrad. I met Neil deGrasse Tyson when he did a book event for Space Chronicles. It was the only book thing that he did, I think, for that. But that was at the American Museum of Natural History down in New York City. So we got to meet him there. So some Star Trek people I recently met this summer. Jonathan Frakes, who played Riker. He was incredibly nice. We've talked about that in a previous video. During that time, I also met Terry Farrell, who played Jadzia Dax. She was very nice. And I met Jeffrey Combs, who is big, not a recurring guest star in Star Trek, but also big in the horror world. So that's my yin and yang, and I told him that. So I got to meet him as well. I met Tony Horwitz before he passed away. You can see one of his books right there, Blue Latitudes. So I got to meet and talk with him for a while. He's one of my favorite authors. And I met other people. Like, I worked at a convenience store for a number of years, and Dennis Leary always used to come in. He'd always wear sunglasses, and he'd always deny who he was, but everybody knew it. So he was definitely not the most friendly person. But I would sometimes have people come in there. I remember one of the funnier ones for me personally, because sometimes when you meet somebody that you've seen on a screen, it doesn't always click exactly where you're seeing these people. So I was at that convenience store working one time, and this car pulled up, and the guy got out of the car, and he left the car running, and he just kind of like popped his head in the door. He didn't come all the way into the store, and he asked for like 2 packs of cigarettes or something. So he bought them, like I said, not entirely coming in, so I gave him the cigarettes and, you know, exchanged the money. So then he went back to his car, and I just remember thinking, wow, I'm surprised that he smokes, because he's a doctor in New York City. And it took me a second to start thinking, by the time he was leaving, again, how do I know this guy's a doctor in New York City? I've never met him before, ever. And it took me a little while to figure it out, but he was actually the doctor in Super Size Me, the documentary from Morgan Spurlock, where he was eating fast food every day, McDonald's, and you know, he was the nutrition, the doctor that he kept talking to, and telling him what he was doing was unhealthy. So it's just, you know, sometimes you see faces of people. I wouldn't say he's famous, but you know, it took me a little while to figure that out. I actually did see Morgan Spurlock too at Comic-Con, New York Comic-Con, back when I used to go to that before it got really big and difficult to get tickets for. But he was in line, actually just in line to get into Comic-Con. A few people ahead of us one time. So yeah, comic conventions, I've seen a lot of famous people. Saw Stan Lee, you know, I didn't get to meet him. That line was incredibly long, but it was cool to be able to see people like that. So yeah, seen a lot of famous people, but I talked about the ones that at least that I've met. And that's it. I'll leave that there. So those were my answers to the Star Trek Voyager tag. So I want to thank Steve Donahue for being a great co-host during Book Trek 2023. He was prolific, of course, in all the videos he's able to make. He can read, you know, a book an hour, basically. I'm a much slower reader. And he's got a lot of time also to make videos, but that's great for the event. And I want to thank him for creating these tags, and they're a lot of fun. And everybody who came along with us on Book Trek, thank you. It was a great time, and I look forward to next year. As always, thank you, BookTube.